A short screech echoed in the dead silent space, the sound of a wine glass lightly touching the glass table. But in that atmosphere, it was like a bullet piercing straight into the heart. No one spoke. Not a clink of cutlery, not the sound of a waiter's footsteps. Even the piano in the corner of the VIP room at Fontaine Royal Hotel stopped mid-note, its final chord hanging in the air as if abandoned. That man, Vincent Maddox, sat in the middle of the room like a cold, unyielding stone, his steel-gray eyes drilling into the woman standing before him. She didn't bow her head. She didn't step back. The air conditioning's breeze lightly lifted the hem of the girl's black and white uniform. Amber Davis, a high-end room waitress, a single mother, someone who never imagined she'd become the center of a power showdown. Her face was calm, but her hands gripped the tray of glasses so tightly her fingertips turned pale. She no longer heard the whispers around her. She no longer felt fear. Only one single sentence rose from the depths of her chest. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." Silence. As if the entire room stopped breathing. Vincent didn't move immediately. Only a vein at his temple twitched, signaling the anger forming within. The billionaire CEO, who could shut down an entire company with a single tweet, had just been told he lacked dignity by a waitress in front of the entire VIP room. A guest in the corner, perhaps a writer or professor, put down their fork and began clapping. One clap, then two, then the whole room. Amber still stood there. Her eyes didn't leave Vincent. Her back was straight. In her chest was a heart pounding like a war drum. And she knew her life would never be the same again. But to understand why someone like her had the courage to stare power in the face, we need to go back a few months, when everything was still quiet and suffocating in a different way. When not wearing her hotel uniform, Amber Davis almost vanished into the crowd. Not because she was small, but because she had learned to walk lightly, speak just enough, and avoid any gaze that could spell trouble. In the rundown apartment block on the west side of Queens, Amber and her son's one-bedroom apartment was barely big enough to turn around without bumping into a chair. The curtain dividing the bedroom from the living room, hand-sewn from scrap fabric, kept Noah from seeing his mother cry when she came home late. Noah was 8. He loved classical music and had his father's eyes, the man who disappeared from their lives without a word. Amber never told her son the truth. She only said, "Your dad's away for work." Each lie burned her throat like swallowing glass. Mornings. Amber taught basic jazz dance at a community center in the neighborhood. The kids called her Miss A, all dancing offbeat but with fire in their eyes. By noon, she'd be home preparing a simple meal for Noah, then rushing to catch the 7 train to Midtown Manhattan for her evening shift at Fontaine Royal Hotel. They lived off tips. No tips meant no electricity, no cough medicine, no birthday cake in March. She kept a small notebook, each colored page tracking expenses, plumbing repair, $180 new ballet shoes, $40 Uber mistake, $21. "Mom, when I grow up, can I audition for America's Got Talent?" Amber had smiled at the question, but that night, she sat alone under a cold shower and sobbed. Not because the question was too naive, but because she wasn't sure she could preserve Noah's faith until he was truly grown. At Fontaine Royal, she was the newest member of the VIP lounge team, a department only trained rigorously after passing multiple rounds of scrutiny, where every glance had to be precisely timed. Smiles couldn't show teeth. Voices had to be clear enough to be polite, but not loud enough to disturb. To the guests, Amber was part of the decor, clean, in place, silent unless spoken to. But there was something they didn't know. Amber had been orphaned at 12, had slept on train station benches to avoid an abusive stepfather. She'd overcome depression by dancing in an old library. And she'd sworn to herself, "I won't let anyone look down on me just because I'm quiet." Sometimes, silence isn't weakness, it's a deliberate choice by those waiting for the right moment to speak. And that moment unexpectedly began with a small accident in the very place where she didn't belong. From the outside, Fontaine Royal Hotel gleamed like an emerald amid Manhattan's steel and glass jungle. Crystal dome, Italian marble pathways, and a gold-embossed logo etched into the silently spinning revolving door. The rich didn't come to Fontaine to rest, they came to be reminded they were different. For the staff inside, it wasn't a hotel, it was a stage. And that stage allowed no mistakes. Before each shift, the VIP lounge team lined up in the standardization room, a windowless space with LED-lit mirrors exposing every flaw-smudged lipstick, misaligned buttons, eyes betraying less than 6 hours of sleep. Marcus Lindley, the evening shift manager, inspected them like a drill sergeant. One frown from him could pull a worker from the shift and dock 30% of their pay. Amber stood at the end of the line. She learned to suck in her stomach, steady her hands when Marcus checked her tray. She learned to hide eye bags with cheap concealer and mask unfinished sleep with a smile. Staff do not belong. Staff perform. The sign hung by the kitchen door, a constant reminder of their place. In the VIP lounge, everything was measured by perfection. Wine glasses weren't just the right type. The logo had to face the guest when set down. Napkins were folded to match the guest's dominant hand. The first greeting wasn't welcome, but, "We've been expecting you, Mr. Ms." Guests didn't need to be polite. Staff weren't allowed to react. Amber once saw a woman drop her room key on the floor just to see which waitress would bend to pick it up fastest. The winner got a smirk and a velvet-coated jab. Quick hands. That's what you're here for, right? Amber thought about quitting, many times. But then Noah would flash through her mind his clumsy cello playing and eager eyes talking about his first school performance. And Amber would stand up again, tie her hair back neatly, step precisely on the cold tile floor. Some places teach you a trade. Some teach you endurance, but only the harshest. Teach you where the line of your self-respect lies. And on a night that seemed ordinary, that self-respect was tested in a way no one could have foreseen, all because of a single misstep. When the evening shift ended at 11:30, most VIP guests were sipping cognac wrapped in silk napkins, half dozing after 5-tiered desserts. Meanwhile, Amber slipped out Fontaine Royal's back door, feet blistered, index finger bleeding from a faulty champagne cork, with exactly $4.87 in her wallet. Not enough for an Uber to Queens, but enough for the 7 train if she made it before 00:15. She ran. Her low-heeled shoes scraped the rough sidewalk. New York's night wind stung her face, cutting through her thin, worn-collared shirt. Her heart raced, not from fear of missing the train, but because Noah was waiting. He only slept after she came home, after hearing a happy story from her day. Each night was a small victory to keep hope alive in his eyes. Once, Amber brought home a leftover slice of red velvet cake from a wedding banquet on the 25th floor. She and Noah ate it together on the kitchen floor, and he laughed like it was a Christmas gift. But that day, no cake, no happy story, just a note on the bedside lamp. "Mom, did you win any battles today?" Amber read it, laughed, then cried. She couldn't recall her last win. Here, surviving a day wasn't living, it was a silent fight. No one cheered, no medals, no days off, just a quiet dream pushing her forward. Have you ever faced such silent battles every day? Share in the comments below. Your story might give strength to someone on the edge of giving up. Change doesn't always come from loud cries. Sometimes quiet perseverance is the most enduring courage. But the bravest are often thrust into their greatest challenge when they're most exhausted. Thursday morning, hotel security was unusually heightened. 3 men in gray suits, earpieces in, stood at every executive floor elevator. Staff were barred from using personal phones or approaching the 46th floor lounge without specific orders. Only one name was whispered behind closed doors: Vincent Maddox. Tech billionaire, 40 farm, founder of NeuroPredict, a company with an AI algorithm that predicts human behavior before people act. Some called him a genius, others a monster. Now, he was at Fontaine Royal, occupying the entire top-floor VIP lounge reserved for those with nothing left to prove. Amber knew his name. She'd overheard a chef whisper, "That guy got a journalist fired just for misspelling his favorite dish." The first time Amber saw Vincent was from a distance, carrying water down the glass hallway on the 45th floor. He stood by a massive window, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a whiskey he didn't sip. His eyes didn't see New York, didn't see people, didn't move, just frozen. His face was sharp as a carved statue, his gaze emotionless. as if everything around him didn't exist mere background to his next plan. She shivered, not from fear, but from sensing something not quite human in the building where she worked. Vincent Maddox didn't request, he commanded. Every dish had to be served at the exact temperature within 7 minutes of completion. The music had to be Beethoven's Symphony No. 7, but only the Allegretto. Staff weren't to call him Mr. Maddox, only, "Yes, where, sir?" No one knew why he was in New York. Rumors said he was planning to oust half of Neuropredict's board. Others claimed he was scouting hotels to buy and turn into a global AI operations hub. Whatever the reason, all staff understood don't draw attention. And above all, don't upset him. Amber stood in the staff room, polishing a silver tray with a soft cloth, ear tuned to snippets from the walkie-talkie. She knew if she ever faced that man, all her skills might not be enough to protect herself. Some people enter a room and make you feel small, but sometimes in their shadow you discover the greatest part of yourself. And then, fate chose the day Amber was most exhausted to place her face to face with that man. The shift began as usual, cold, quiet, steady like the wheels of a subway train cutting through the night. Amber was assigned to the executive lounge on the 46th floor, the ultra-secure area where every request passed through Marcus Lindley's ears before reaching the staff. She didn't question it, didn't ask why it was her today. She only knew the order came from upper management. Table 9. No mistakes allowed. The man there is why this hotel survived the pandemic. Marcus said, eyes avoiding hers, as if dodging any trace of involvement. Amber entered the lounge like she was stepping onto a Broadway stage for the final performance of her life. Table 9 sat by the massive glass wall, with all of Manhattan sprawling like a living map below. Vincent Maddox was there, alone. Before him, an untouched plate of prime Wagyu steak, a glass of red wine tilted at a 45-degree angle. Not a word, not a glance, not a nod. Amber approached light as a breath, carrying a silver tray with a fresh bottle of vintage champagne from the private cellar, the kind Maddox demanded opened at the table. No more than 3 seconds before pouring, she tilted the tray. The cork was already loose. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but because it was 11 p. And she hadn't eaten since noon. Then pop. The cork came off normally. But at that exact moment, Amber's heel hit a slick patch of unwiped water on the polished stone floor. Her foot slipped, just slightly, but enough to tilt the tray. The champagne bottle tipped. A spray of sparkling wine shot straight onto the collar of Vincent Maddox's silver gray suit. No one screamed. No one gasped. Only Amber's sharp intake of breath, swallowed in her throat in a thick silence, as if the entire room had shut down. Vincent slowly set his napkin down. He didn't look at his suit, didn't look at the bottle, only stared straight into her eyes. Coldware, deepu, like a winter lake that had never known how to crack. What's your name, he asked, voice even, like a robot reprogrammed for emotion. Amber wanted to answer. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus appeared within 10 seconds. His eyes flicked to the wine stain. Then he bowed to Vincent like a student who dropped the principal's book. My deepest apologies, Rowan, sir. I'll handle this immediately. The employee will be suspended within 24 hours. Amber stood frozen, her name tossed out like a system error. Her sentence declared before she could defend herself. She bowed her head, turned away. Her steps faltered. Her heart pounded against her ribs, as if fighting her own body. 1 second of a slip can sweep away a whole life, but sometimes that very fall is the starting point for someone to rise, entirely different from who they were. And if Amber had looked back then, she would have seen the only eyes following her, not those of a guest, but of an older man quietly watching everything from afar. No one noticed the man at table 3 near the silent piano, in a white orchid pot shoulder high. He'd been there over an hour, one hand lightly flipping through the New York Times, the other holding a cooled espresso. But his eyes never left table 9. Not for Vincent Maddox, for Amber. Walter Henderson, 68, former senior counsel for an international banking conglomerate, now a strategic advisor to Fontaine Royal's board. A man who lived by invisible principles and eyes sharper than a scalpel. No staff knew who he really was. They just called him the grumpy old man in the brown suit. He didn't need greetings. He left no tips. But he remembered every server, every expression, every action. That's how he judged a place, not by chandeliers or Persian rugs, but by how the smallest people handled power. When the champagne slipped from Amber's hand, Henderson was the only one to lower his newspaper. He saw her eyes, then when he went, her trembling hands. The way Vincent Maddox didn't rage, but did something cruel or stayed silent. The kind of silence that didn't shout, but still crushed from within. And he saw how Marcus Lindley reacted unusually fast, not letting the employee speak, not giving the girl a second to defend her dignity. Henderson breathed slowly. He'd seen this kind of collapse before, when a young banker was blamed for $1 million error just for not being in the chairman's inner circle. Amber didn't know someone was watching her, nor did she know that someone had been ousted from a boardroom chair by Vincent Maddox 10 years ago, after a shady merger that cost hundreds of jobs. Henderson lifted his espresso, took a sip, winced. Too bitter, but not as bitter as what he'd just seen. He stood unhurried, didn't approach Amber, didn't intervene. He only silently filed everything in his mind, as if building a case, and for the first time in years, he felt something stirring, slowly but unstoppable. Some don't step into the fight. They watch you, but if they know the rules, one nod from them can tilt the entire board. And as one observer quietly left, backstage at the hotel, a small report was about to be signed, one that would push Amber to the very bottom of the system. The next morning, Amber received an email from HR subject line, 3 words, Incident Follow-Up Report. No apologies, no line of concern. Just a notice she was temporarily reassigned from the VIP lounge, pending investigation into the violation of service standards with a platinum-level guest. Amber didn't reply right away. She read it 3 times, then locked her screen, leaned against the kitchen wall where the smell of burnt bread from the electric oven lingered. Noah was still asleep. He'd left a note, I wish Mom a big win today. Her eyes stung. This battle was a loss. The quietest kind when even the truth wasn't allowed to speak. She arrived at the hotel earlier than usual, not to argue, but to check the report. The HR office on the 12th floor had no windows, no laughter, just the smell of paper and sanitizer. A female staffer handed her the printed report, 4 pages, numbered, signed by Marcus Lindley. What stunned Amber wasn't the content, but how it was written. Employee Amber Davis displayed uncontrolled behavior while serving a key guest, showed signs of emotional instability, failed to follow standard wine pouring protocol. Emotional instability. Amber felt her voice stripped away. She recalled last night clearly. She hadn't spoken, hadn't reacted. She only bowed and stepped back. And now, that very silence was used to prove she couldn't control herself. She left HR shoulders heavy, heart gripped by a question countless others crushed by power have asked. Why is the word of someone without power always rewritten by those with position? Have you ever been rewritten in a way you couldn't defend? If you felt that, leave a word below. You might not be the only one carrying it. Amber returned to the locker room, shed her lounge uniform, and put on the one for the side shift serving an outdoor wedding. Standing near the kitchen, no tips, no prestige, just sweat and loud remixed music. But in her mind, it wasn't just a report anymore. It was a counter-investigation. Who wrote it, who approved it, and why when Henderson was in the lounge? Sometimes the scariest thing isn't a distorted truth, but that no one checks if it was ever true. And right then, at a seemingly unrelated banquet, a guest's single question began to crack everything from within. That afternoon, Amber was assigned to an outdoor wedding banquet, a lavish event attended by finance and tech elites. She didn't care who was there, didn't care about the $500,000 wedding dress or that the groom was a senator's son. She just wanted to stay quiet, do her job, pour correctly. Table 12 requested more champagne. Amber leaned to fill the glass of a silver-haired woman in tortoiseshell glasses. The woman looked at her, lips curling. You look familiar. You're the one who spilled wine on Mr. Maddox last night, right? Amber froze. A brief silence. Then she spoke softly, as if exhaling. It's strange. A small mistake from someone powerless is remembered forever. But the big mistakes of the powerful are never named. The words weren't planned. They had no purpose. But they burst from a deep, long compressed place within her. And at that moment, Walter Henderson, sitting 3 tables away, overheard. He stopped cutting his food. His eyes left his plate. They fixed on the woman in the hotel uniform, standing straight, face still polite, but eyes no longer those of someone oppressed. When the banquet ended, an event staffer approached Amber, asking her to leave the area due to guest complaints about inappropriate attitude. She didn't protest. She walked to the locker room, opened her locker, leaned against the cold metal door. Her hands trembled not from fear of being fired, but because, for the first time in years, she felt she'd finally said something true. Even if just one sentence, even if just once, even if no one applauded. Some words need no preparation, they're forged from years of endurance. When they escape, they don't just speak for you, they speak for a lifetime held back. And what Amber didn't know was that her words had reached the right person, at the right time, and had begun to shake the silent structure of Fontaine Royal. The next morning, Amber entered the hotel counting down her final moments. She knew she was in dangerous territory. 3 incidents in a week, even without real fault, were enough for someone to be temporarily let go for staff restructuring. She wore the wedding banquet uniform, hair neatly tied, adorned with the fake pearl clip Noah gave her last year. No one greeted her. No one looked at her. And that silence what was the most terrifying thing. In the staff room, a brown envelope sat on her locker shelf, no sender, just her name typed Amber Davis. Her hands felt cold as she opened it. Inside, a photocopy of last night's report revised. No more emotional instability. No more suspension. Instead, a handwritten line, unsigned. Those who keep their dignity when forced to bow have never truly failed. Amber gripped the paper, heart racing. Who revised it? Why? Who dared challenge Marcus? No one knew, but clearly, someone was watching her and standing on her side. That afternoon, Marcus Lindley was abruptly summoned to the executive office. Within 4 hours, no one saw him return. That evening, an internal email announced he'd resigned for personal reasons. No goodbye, no farewell party. No one mentioned his name again. And stranger still, Amber was called back to serve in the 46th floor lounge that same week. But this time, no one gave her orders like before. No disdainful glances. No hovering supervisors scanning for errors. Just a new guest list and the first name, Walter H. Henderson. Sri Babiya Rashfendid and Karam. Table 7. Requested server Amber Davis. She held the list, standing still for a few seconds. It felt like the ground beneath her had shifted a few millimeters. Not because she won, but because, for the first time in years, she wasn't playing by someone else's rules. Someone had flipped the board. For her, not every change comes from shouting. Some begin with one true sentence spoken at the right time, heard by the right person. And in that next meeting, Amber would face a question bigger than anything she'd prepared for. Where do you want to stand if you're no longer just a server? Amber stepped into the 46th floor lounge on Friday afternoon, precisely 17:03. The sunset streamed through the massive glass windows, bathing the space in cold orange, starkly contrasting the quiet fear still lurking within her. Table 7. Walter Henderson was already seated. No prior notice. No staff to greet him. Before him, a cup of black coffee. No sugar. No ice or no milk. Amber approached, feeling more like she was entering an interrogation than serving. "Hello, sir. I'm Amber." "I know," he interrupted, voice low, calm. "Please, sit." Amber froze. "Sit." No staff sat with guests. Not in any training manual. But he didn't wait for agreement. Just nodded lightly toward the chair opposite. Amber glanced around. No one intervened. No one gave orders. She sat. Henderson studied her, as if seeing something both fragile and formidably resilient. "Do you know why I requested you?" Amber shook her head. "Because you don't speak much. But the one thing you said made me stop reading my paper." A pause. Then he pulled a thin envelope from his coat pocket and placed it before her. "This is an offer. A sober one. A certifiable one. Not from me, but from the board. We're building a new internal training program for high-potential staff who thrive under real-world pressure. I nominated you." Amber blinked. For the first time in her life, she didn't know how to react. Whether to refuse, doubt, or cry. "But why me?" she whispered. "I'm just a server." Henderson didn't smile. Just looked straight at her. "You're a server, yes, but you serve justice when no one asked you to. You have a sense of principle not everyone here does." Amber opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation to a 3-month mentorship program with the potential to transition into a senior management support role upon completion. No one had ever told her a single well-timed sentence could completely alter the course of a life. Amber didn't sign the paper immediately. She left the table, walked to the glass hallway, and looked down at the bustling crowds below the building. In her heart, it wasn't the joy of victory, but a new fear taking shape. Am I worthy? True opportunities don't come when you're ready. They come when you're hurt enough, brave enough, to not turn away when called by name. Have you ever had a moment when someone saw your value when you no longer believed in yourself? Share below. Your story might strengthen someone else. But not everyone was pleased to see a server sit as an equal with the powerful. And Table 9 was ready to strike back. The next week passed as if the entire hotel was shedding its skin. Amber entered the morning internal meeting with the trainee management group. She wore a thin gray blazer, hair neatly pinned up, a new name tag clipped on. Amber Davis, Strategic Staff Training. Everything seemed in place. Until she stepped into the hallway. A cluster of veteran front desk staff stood huddled. She passed by. Their laughter stopped. One whispered, not quite soft enough to be accidental. "Oh, another success story from playing the victim." Another added, "Looks like spilling wine on a billionaire suit gets you a promotion around here." Amber didn't turn back. But each word, each syllable pierced like needles in the back of her neck. In the elevator, a mid-level manager, once Marcus's protege, remarked casually to someone nearby, "It's hard to maintain credibility when a server gets to sit with executives, just for some emotional politics." That night, Amber sat alone in her small room. She opened her laptop, staring at the mentorship program in progress, the first presentation she had to complete. Her fingers rested on the keyboard, but her mind echoed with those small words repeating like dripping water in the night. "Not good enough? Only lifted by scandal. No one really believes in you." She shut the laptop, buried her face in her hands. A part of her wanted to return to serving, where there were fewer eyes, less envy, less weight. And then, at that moment, Noah, her son, walked in, holding a scribbled drawing of his mom on a stage, with messy words below. "My mom is stronger than the loud grown-ups." Amber smiled faintly. Her heart trembled. She remembered one thing. Whispers don't break anyone unless you take them as commands. They don't need to shout to make you fall. A whisper at the right moment when you doubt yourself is enough. But standing up even just one more time proves them wrong. And just when Amber thought the battle had quieted, a major event unexpectedly thrust everything into the headlines. Fontaine Royal Hotel hosted a 25th anniversary gala, a 3-day lavish affair where the city's most powerful clinked glasses, talking of legacy, values, and sustainable growth. Amber wasn't on the official guest list. She was assigned to support the mentorship team's logistics, ensuring speakers had slides on time, water in place, lighting on point. And on the second night of the event, something went wrong. Amber was checking the projector to LED screen connection when she saw Vincent Maddox's name on the speaker schedule. Special address leadership in times of crisis. She froze backstage. This was the man who nearly cost her job, who labeled an accidental spill as uncontrolled emotional behavior, the one who crushed her without lifting a finger. Vincent took the stage, in a black suit and silver tie. The crowd applauded as if welcoming a modern king. He began speaking. Cold. Smoother and precise was so about human resource ecosystems, about leadership responsibility, about trust and empowerment. Amber stood backstage, clutching a water glass for the speaker, hands tight. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool room. She knew every word was a mask. And she knew she couldn't step out, couldn't grab the mic, couldn't shout. But someone did it for her. On the LED screen behind Vincent, meant for hotel history clips, an internal report scan, suddenly appeared the one Marcus Lindley used to suspend Amber. Bold red text screamed emotional instability. Then the revised version flashed up with Henderson's handwritten note. Those who keep their dignity when forced to bow have never truly failed. Vincent turned, staring at the screen. In less than a second, his eyes scanned each line, and when they hit the revised note, his pupils contracted. His right hand on the podium trembled slightly. He tried to swallow, but his throat stuck like it was glued shut. The stage lights bore down, exposing every tiny twitch on his usually stone-cold mouth. Someone whispered in the crowd, but Vincent didn't hear anymore. Everything sounded light. The audience below blurred, like a nightmare. A trembling hand reached to adjust the mic, then dropped because there was nothing left to say. He was defeated not by shouts, but by a truth displayed publicly before all. And for the first time in his leadership life, he no longer controlled the stage he stood on. The next day, headlines roared. Fontaine Gala disrupted by leaked internal document, questions raised about hotel management transparency. Vincent Maddox announced his withdrawal from the strategic board. Truth doesn't need to be shouted to shake the world. It just needs a big enough stage, and someone brave enough not to erase it. As the lights dimmed, Amber returned to her room, but what awaited wasn't peace, but a door opening to something entirely new. Surrey. Amber had passed that room hundreds of times. 47th floor, matte black door, brass handle. No nameplate, no meeting schedule. But everyone knew it was Fontaine Royal's highest executive office. Before, whenever she passed, she'd straighten her back not for confidence, but to avoid glancing inside. That door wasn't for her. She just dusted the hallway, checked wine glasses at VIP events, adjusted curtains for international conferences. But today, she stood before it, alone. In her hand was an internal invitation, stamped with Henderson's name, bearing the words, "We don't need more performers. We need more truth-tellers." She took a deep breath. The room inside wasn't what she imagined. No gold plating, no leather, no endless conference table like in the movies. Just a space with natural light, a whiteboard covered in notes, and an empty chair. At the head of the table was Henderson, as always, waiting in silence. "You're late," he said. Amber faltered. "No matter. I was late by nearly 20 years myself," he smiled, light as if confessing his own fault. Amber sat in the empty chair. She looked around. A group sat across from her. None had worked with her downstairs. But their eyes held no disdain. They listened, and for the first time, Amber was asked, "What do you think is truly wrong with how we treat frontline staff?" She had no prepared speech, no analytical charts, but she had experience. Calloused hands, nights coming home with bleeding feet and a weeping heart. And she began to speak, one sentence at a time. Slow, clear, true. When she left that room, sunlight slanted through the glass, casting golden streaks across the tiled floor, bathing the hallway in a warm glow. She glanced back at the door closing behind her, a door she hadn't dared knock on for years. But it turned out it was only locked to those who believed they weren't worthy. Many doors aren't locked. They're just waiting for you to believe you're worthy to knock. And once you do step through and let your presence force the room to change, Amber thought she'd overcome her greatest battle until she returned home and found Noah waiting, holding a letter in his hand. Amber returned home later than usual. The door was slightly ajar as always, so Noah could hear her enter without startling from sleep. But tonight, Noah wasn't asleep. He sat on the living room floor, desk lamp glowing, holding a letter. His face tense, as if grappling with something too big for his age. Amber knelt down. "Sorry, honey, I'm late." Noah held out the letter. "Mom, they picked me for the summer program. I get to study at the language academy. I did the test. Remember, they said I'm good at translating. Amber froze. She'd forgotten she'd applied for Noah's free scholarship 3 months ago on a late night after he'd slept, folding her crumpled uniform. She knelt and hugged him. Silent, Noah whispered. Mom, that day you came home and didn't tell a happy story like usual? I was so sad. But now I get it. Not every day has a happy story. But as long as I have you, that's enough. Amber bit her lip, tears falling soundlessly. She held him tight, as if apologizing for every time she thought she was a burden instead of a springboard. She didn't need applause, didn't need her name in internal reports. She just needed one person to truly see her and never look away. Being seen isn't just being noticed. It's someone truly understanding your pain, your resilience, your silence. And when that happens, you don't need to shout anymore. Your presence speaks for itself. If you've ever felt like Amber quietly trudging through long days with no one truly seeing you, this story is for you. Tell us who was the first to truly see you, and who have you seen that you haven't dared to speak to. Thank you for watching to the end of this journey. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to Unveiled Wealth for more everyday stories that move even the hardest hearts. See you in the next video, where truth, even the smallest, still has the power to change fates.